When Levi Jensen found a blood-soaked girl clutching her swollen belly on the prairie road that October morning, he had no idea that saving her life would cost him everything he'd built in Shadow Creek. The wagon wheels carved fresh ruts through the ambergrass as Levi guided his team down the familiar stretch toward town. Dawn light painted the Montana sky in shades of rose and gold, and the crisp air carried the promise of winter's approach. His daughter Stella sat beside him, her small hands folded in her lap, chattering about the school books they'd pick up at Morrison's general store. "Papa, will Miss Peyton really let me help with the younger children?" Stella's voice held that breathless excitement only a 7-year-old could muster. "I reckon she will, little sparrow." Levi's weathered hands gentle on the reins. "You've got a teaching heart, just like your mama had." The mention of his late wife, Nora, still brought that familiar ache to his chest. 3 years gone, and sometimes he still reached for her side of the bed in those drowsy morning moments. But Stella needed him present, not lost in grief's shadows. He'd built their life here on the promise of new beginnings, 200 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy log house with windows facing east to catch the morning sun, and enough distance from Shadow Creek to keep the ghosts at bay. That's when he saw her, at a figure hunched beside the road, dark hair streaming loose, one hand pressed against the trunk of a cottonwood for support. Even from a distance, Levi could see the telltale curve of her condition, heavy with child, and by the look of it, near her time. Her dress was torn, revealing patches of pale skin against the autumn morning. "Whoa there!" He pulled the team to a halt, dust swirling around the wagon wheels. "Stella, stay put." The girl looked up as his boots hit the ground, and Levi's breath caught. She couldn't be more than 17, with storm-gray eyes that held too much fear for someone so young. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, revealing angry purple bruises that made his jaw clench. Blood had dried on her lip, and her left cheek bore the clear imprint of a man's hand. Fresh scratches ran down her arms as if she'd fought through brambles in the dark. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the prairie wind. I can't." Her legs buckled, and Levi caught her before she hit the ground. You can almost smell the desperation clinging to her like smoke from a dying fire. "Easy. Now, miss. You're safe." He could feel her trembling through the thin fabric of her dress, could see the way her free hand instinctively protected her swollen belly. "What's your name?" "Layla." She clutched at his shirt with surprising strength, her knuckles white against the worn cotton. "Layla Steele. But if Owen finds me, he'll kill me. I swear he will." Levi's blood chilled. Owen Lane, he knew that name. The man owned half the businesses in Shadow Creek and had his fingers in every crooked deal from here to Billings. Rich, powerful, and mean as a rattlesnake when crossed. Lane's mansion sat on the hill overlooking the town like a fortress, and his influence stretched into every corner of the territory. "Owen Lane did this to you." Fresh tears tracked down her dirt-stained cheeks. He said if I ever told anyone about the baby, he'd make sure I disappeared. Like I never existed." Her hand moved protectively over her belly. "But I can't raise his child in that house. I can't let him turn an innocent babe into something twisted like himself." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of approaching rain. Storm clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy with promise. Levi glanced at the sky, then back at the trembling girl in his arms. Every practical bone in his body screamed at him to turn around, drive home, and forget what he'd seen. "Papa." Stella's voice drifted from the wagon, uncertain. Levi looked back at his daughter, then down at the broken girl in his arms. Owen Lane wasn't a man to cross lightly. The rancher had worked too hard building his spread, creating a safe haven for Stella after losing Nora. One wrong move against someone like Lane could cost him everything: his land, his cattle, maybe even his life. But when he looked into Layla's eyes, he saw something that made his choice for him. The same desperate hope Nora had worn the night Stella was born. That fierce, protective love that would sacrifice anything for the innocent life, depending on it. "Can you manage the wagon ride to my place?" he asked softly. You'd help me?" Even knowing who he is. Disbelief colored her voice. Levi thought of his wife's gentle hands, the way she'd taken in every stray animal and wounded soul that wandered onto their property. "My Nora always said a man's character ain't measured by what he does when it's easy." but by what he does when it costs him something. He helped Layla to her feet, noting how she favored her right side, the way her breath caught when she moved. Stella, honey, we're going to have a guest for a while. Miss Layla here needs our help. His daughter's eyes widened as she took in Layla's condition, the bruises, the blood, the way she cradled her unborn child. But Stella had inherited her mother's compassionate heart along with her golden hair. She can have Mama's room, Stella said solemnly. The one with the morning light. As Levi helped Layla into the wagon bed, cushioning her with the horse blankets, he tried not to think about what Owen Lane would do when he discovered his pregnant mistress had vanished. The man's reach extended far beyond Shadow Creek, into the territorial legislature and beyond. He owned judges, sheriffs, even had ties to the railroad barons back east. Tell me about your husband, Layla whispered as they began the journey to his homestead. Nora passed 3 years ago. Fever took her one winter. The words still came hard. She was the kind of woman who saw good in everyone. Even me. Layla's hand found Stella's small fingers, and his daughter began humming one of Nora's old lullabies. The sound drifted across the prairie like a prayer, and Levi felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of the careful walls he'd built around his heart since his wife's death. Miss Layla, Stella whispered, do you know if your baby's going to be a boy or a girl? I don't know, sweetheart, but I hope. Layla's voice broke. I hope it's nothing like its father. The wagon crested the hill overlooking the Jensen spread. The log house sat nestled in a grove of cottonwoods, smoke curling from the chimney where he'd banked the morning fire. His cattle dotted the pasture, like dark stones against the golden grass, and the barn he'd built with his own hands stood solid against the approaching storm. Home. Safety. Peace. But even as they approached the sanctuary he'd built, a rider appeared on the distant ridge, a dark silhouette against the storm clouds, watching their every move. The rider on the ridge disappeared like smoke the moment Levi turned to look directly at him. But the image burned in his mind, a man. In a dark coat, horse standing statue still against the gray sky. Owen Lane's men were already hunting. Papa, who was that? Stella's voice carried a tremor that made Levi's chest tighten. Just a drifter, most likely. He kept his tone steady, but his hand moved instinctively to the rifle tucked beneath the wagon seat. Let's get Miss Layla inside before this storm breaks. The first raindrops hit as they pulled into the yard, fat and heavy with the promise of a proper downpour. Levi helped Layla down from the wagon, feeling how she leaned into his strength, how her breathing had grown shallow and quick during the ride. The baby was coming soon, maybe sooner than any of them were prepared for. Can you make it to the house? He asked. She nodded, though her face had gone pale as milk. I've walked farther on worse days. The Jensen homestead wrapped around them, like a protective embrace. Nora's rose bushes, now bare with autumn's touch, lined the porch where she used to sit in the evenings. The windows glowed warm with lamplight, and the smell of this morning's coffee still lingered in the air. It was the kind of place that spoke of permanence, of roots growing deep into good soil. Stella ran ahead to open the door, her small boots clattering on the wooden porch. Miss Layla, this is our home. Papa built it all himself, even the furniture. Layla paused in the doorway, taking in the simple but comfortable interior. Hand-hewn furniture, a stone fireplace large enough to warm the whole main room, and everywhere. The gentle touches that spoke of a woman's love, embroidered cushions, dried flowers in mason jars, photographs in wooden frames. Your wife was beautiful, she said softly, studying the portrait above the mantel. Nora smiled down at them, her eyes bright with the same warmth that lived in Stella's face. She was. Levi's voice roughened. Come on, let's get you settled. He led her to the bedroom that had been Nora's sanctuary, the room with east-facing windows where morning light spilled across the hand-stitched quilt. Everything remained exactly as his wife had left it, as if he'd been waiting for someone worthy to disturb the sacred space. I can't take her room, Layla protested, but her legs were already giving out. You can and you will. Levi caught her arm as she swayed. Stella, fetch some warm water and clean rags. And see if you can find some of your mama's dresses that might fit. As his daughter scurried to obey, Levi helped Layla to the bed. Up close, he could see the full extent of her injuries. Not just the obvious bruises on her face, but the careful way she moved, protecting ribs that were likely cracked. The torn dress revealed rope burns on her wrists, and her bare feet were cut and bleeding. "How long were you walking?" he asked gently. "Since before dawn. I I climbed out the window while he was sleeping off his whiskey." She touched her swollen belly. "The baby's been restless all night. I think it knows." Thunder rolled across the prairie, and rain began drumming against the windows. Levi lit the oil lamp on the bedside table, casting warm light across the room. For a moment, it felt like Nora was there with them, approving of his choice to shelter this broken girl. "Tell me about Owen Lane," he said quietly. "How did you come to be in his house?" Layla's eyes went distant. "My pa died 2 years ago. Lung fever. Ma followed him 6 months later, and I had nowhere to go. Owen, he seemed kind at first. Offered me work as a housekeeper, a room of my own, decent wages." She laughed bitterly. "I was so grateful. Such a fool. When did it change?" "The night of the territorial governor's visit. Owen had been drinking, showing off for his important friends. After they left, he came to my room." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Said I owed him for his kindness. Said no one would believe a word against him if I tried to tell." Levi's hands clenched into fists. He'd heard whispers about Owen Lane's treatment of women, but the man's wealth and influence kept most folks quiet. And the baby? He was rough, careless. When I told him I was carrying his child, he flew into a rage. Said I was trying to trap him, ruin his reputation." She touched the bruise on her cheek. "That's when he started hitting me regular. Said if I ever breathed a word about the baby, he'd make sure I disappeared without a trace." Stella returned with an armload of supplies, her young face serious with purpose. "I found Mama's blue dress, the one with the buttons. And some of her." She blushed. "Her unmentionables. Thank you, little sparrow. Why don't you start some supper while I help Miss Layla get cleaned up?" As Stella headed for the kitchen, Levi turned back to Layla. "You're safe here. I give you my word. You don't understand what you're risking." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Owen Lane destroys anyone who crosses him. He'll come for me, and when he does, let me worry about Owen Lane." Levi's voice carried a hardness that surprised them both. "My Nora always said there's times when a man has to choose between what's easy and what's right. This is one of those times." He moved to the window, gazing out at the storm-lashed prairie. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the roads to mud and washing away wagon tracks. Good. It would slow down any pursuit, give them time to plan. "You need to understand something," he said without turning around. "Owen Lane's reach is long, but it ain't infinite. This land is mine, free and clear. I've got friends in the territory who remember what it was like before men like Lane bought their way to power. Friends." Hope flickered in her voice. "Elijah Cross, for one. He's the circuit judge, and he's got no love for Lane's kind of corruption. And there's Peyton Armstrong. She runs the schoolhouse, but she's got connections all the way to the territorial capital." He turned back to her. "You're not as alone as you think." A sudden contraction seized Layla, and she doubled over with a gasp. Her hands flew to her belly, and Levi could see the tension ripple across her middle. "How far apart are the pains?" he asked, moving to her side. They started this morning, but they're getting stronger." Another wave hit, and she gripped his hand with surprising strength. I think the baby's coming." Outside, the storm raged with increasing fury, and somewhere in the distance, Levi could swear he heard the sound of horses moving through the night. Owen Lane's men, searching every homestead, every hiding place. But as another contraction gripped Layla and she cried out in pain, Levi realized that some battles choose their own timing, and this one was about to begin whether they were ready or not. The contraction passed, leaving Layla gasping and pale against the pillows. Levi had helped birth calves and foals, but bringing a human child into the world was territory he'd never navigated alone. When Stella was born, the town doctor had been there, along with 2 experienced midwives and Nora's own mother. "How long between pains?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maybe 10 minutes? They're getting stronger." Layla's gray eyes were wide with fear. "I don't know what to do. My mother never told me." "Easy now." Levi pulled up a chair beside the bed. "We'll figure this out together." "Stella," he called. His daughter appeared in the doorway, her face flushed from working over the stove. "Yes, Papa. I need you to ride to the Armstrong place. Tell Miss Peyton we need her help. Tell her," He paused, weighing his words. Tell her it's about bringing new life into the world. In this storm, Stella's eyes widened. Take lightning. He knows the way even in the dark. And Stella, if anyone stops you, anyone at all, you tell them you're going to see about a sick calf. Nothing more. Understanding flickered across his daughter's face. At 7, she'd already learned that some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. I'll be careful, Papa. As Stella bundled into her rain slicker and headed for the barn, Levi turned back to Layla. Another contraction was building, and he could see the fear in her eyes deepening. I'm scared, she whispered. What if something goes wrong? What if the baby, nothing's going wrong? He took her hand, feeling the calluses on her palm from hard work. You're stronger than you know. I can see it in you. The sound of hoofbeats echoed from the yard as Stella rode out into the storm. Lightning's hooves splashed through the mud, and then horse and rider disappeared into the rain-soaked darkness. Levi said a silent prayer for his daughter's safety, then focused on the woman who needed him now. Tell me about your parents, he said, hoping to distract her from the pain. What were they like? Pa was a blacksmith. Strong hands, gentle heart. A small smile crossed her face. He used to sing while he worked. Said it made the metal bend easier. And Ma, she grew the most beautiful garden. Roses, jasmine, herbs. For cooking. The smile faded. After they died, Owen Lane bought their property for practically nothing. Tore down the house, plowed under Ma's garden. He's got a lot to answer for. More than you know. Layla's voice dropped to a whisper. I heard things, living in his house. Conversations he thought I couldn't understand. He's been buying up land all through the valley, forcing people out. There's talk of bringing the railroad through, and he wants to control every mile of track. Another contraction hit, stronger this time. Layla gripped the quilt with white knuckles, her breath coming in short gasps. When it passed, she looked at Levi with something like desperation. If something happens to me, promise me you won't let him take the baby. Promise me. Nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me. The intensity in her voice made him lean forward. I promise. But you're going to be fine, and so is your child. Outside, the storm seemed to be intensifying. Wind howled around the eaves, and rain lashed the windows like thrown gravel. But beneath the natural fury, Levi heard something else, the distant sound of multiple horses moving through the night. That he moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the landscape in brief, stark moments. And there, at the edge of his property, he saw them. At least 4 riders, dark shapes against the storm. They're here, he said quietly. Who? But Layla already knew. Terror flooded her face. Owen's men. They're keeping their distance for now, probably waiting for the storm to pass. He checked his rifle, ensuring it was loaded. But they're watching. A particularly strong contraction seized Layla, and she cried out despite her efforts to stay quiet. The sound seemed to echo through the house, and Levi prayed it hadn't carried to the men outside. I need to push, she gasped. Something's happening. Levi had no choice but to trust his instincts. He'd seen enough births in the barn to know the signs. Not yet. Try to breathe through it. Help is coming. But even as he spoke, he wondered if Stella had made it to the Armstrong place. The storm was getting worse, and the roads would be nearly impassable. If she was caught out there alone, Levi. Layla's voice was strained. There's something else you need to know. About the baby's father. What about him? Owen Lane isn't just cruel. He's sick. Twisted. I've seen him with animals, with people who can't fight back. She gripped his hand. If he gets this child, he'll destroy it. Turn it into something horrible. That's not going to happen. You don't understand. He has judges in his pocket, lawmen who do his bidding. If he wants to claim this baby as his own, there's nothing. Another contraction cut off her words. This time, Levi could see the change in her body, the way her muscles tensed and worked. The baby was coming whether they were ready or not. I can see the head, he said, amazement coloring his voice. Layla, you need to push now. Outside, lightning split the sky, and in that brief moment of illumination, Levi saw the riders moving closer. They were no longer content to wait at the property line. For men on horseback, rain streaming from their hats, moving with the purposeful slowness of predators closing in on wounded prey. Push, he urged, even as his mind raced through their options. The rifle by the door, the pistol in his bedroom drawer, the shotgun in the barn. All useless if they were outnumbered and outgunned. I can't, Layla sobbed. It hurts too much. You can. You have to. He looked into her eyes, seeing the fear and exhaustion there. Your baby needs you to be strong. Just a little longer. The sound of hoofbeats grew louder, circling the house like wolves around a campfire. But with it came another sound, lighter, faster hoofbeats approaching from the opposite direction. Stella, Levi breathed. His daughter's voice called out through the storm. Papa? I brought help. The front door burst open, and Peyton Armstrong rushed in, her medical bag in hand, and her graying hair wild from the ride. Behind her came an unexpected figure, Judge Elijah Cross, his black coat dripping with rain and his weathered face grim with purpose. Where is she? Peyton demanded. In here, and the baby's coming now, Levi called back, as the schoolteacher turned midwife. Rushed to Layla's side. Judge Cross moved to the window. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip as he studied the riders in the yard. Owen Lane's men, he said quietly. But they won't move against a territorial judge. Not tonight. But even as he spoke, the largest of the riders dismounted and began walking toward the house, his hand resting on his gun, and Levi realized that some men were beyond the reach of law and reason. The man approaching the house moved with the swagger of someone accustomed to intimidation. Even through the rain-lashed darkness, Levi could see the pearl handle of his Colt gleaming against his hip. This wasn't just another hired gun. This was someone who enjoyed his work. That's Von Bishop, Judge Cross said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of hard experience. Owen Lane's right hand. He's wanted in 3 territories for murder. But Lane's money keeps him protected. Push, Layla. Peyton Armstrong's voice cut through the tension from the bedroom. The baby's almost here. A scream tore from Layla's throat, primal and desperate. In the lamplight, Levi could see the top of the baby's head, dark hair slicked with birth fluids. Life struggling to enter a world that was already trying to destroy it. That Bishop's boots thudded on the porch steps. His knock, when it came, was less request than demand. 3 hard raps that seemed to shake the entire house. Open up, Jensen. We know you got something that belongs to Mr. Lane. Judge Cross stepped forward, his badge catching the lamplight. I'll handle this. No. Levi's voice was iron. This is my land, my house. He wants to parley. He can do it through me. Another scream from the bedroom, weaker this time. Peyton's urgent voice, the cords around the baby's neck. I need more light and clean water, now. Stella, soaked to the skin but steady as her mother had been, rushed to help. At 7 years old, she moved with the efficiency of someone who'd learned early that life balanced on knife's edge between safety and catastrophe. Jensen, Bishop's voice carried a note of impatience. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Send out the girl, and we'll pretend this never happened. Levi opened the door just wide enough to show himself, rifle held loose but ready. Rain drove against his face, and he could smell the horses steaming in the yard, could see the other 3 riders spread out in a loose circle around the house. There's no girl here, he said calmly. Just my family. Bishop's smile was cold as winter. Wind. Now, that's not what I heard. Word is you picked up a runaway this morning. Pregnant little thing, stolen property of Mr. Lane's. Property. The word came out like a curse. Bound to him by contract, you might say. And theft is a hanging offense. In these parts, Bishop's hand moved closer to his gun. Of course, Mr. Lane's a reasonable man. He's willing to overlook your mistake if you hand her over quiet-like. From the bedroom came a different sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn taking its first breath. The baby was alive, but Layla's voice was barely a whisper. Is it all right? Beautiful baby girl, Peyton called out. But the mother's lost a lot of blood. She needs rest and care. Bishop's head turned toward the sound, and his smile widened. Well now, sounds like Mr. Lane's got himself an heir. He'll be pleased to know his property's been productive. Get off my land. Levi's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd faced down wolves and survived 3 Montana winters. I don't think so. Bishop stepped closer, rain streaming from his hat brim. See, Mr. Lane's got papers. Legal documents saying that. Girl signed herself over to him, debt and all. Makes her his responsibility. Makes that baby his too. What papers? Judge Cross appeared in the doorway, his presence immediately changing the dynamic. Bishop's confidence flickered. Judge Cross. Didn't expect to see you out here in this weather. Answer the question, Bishop. What papers? Mr. Lane's got a contract. Signed and witnessed. Girl owes him money for room and board, and she agreed to work it off. Bring me these papers. Well, now, they're back in town, safe in Mr. Lane's office. Then you've got no legal standing here. Cross's voice cut through the rain like a blade. This woman is under my protection, and any attempt to remove her will be considered kidnapping. The other riders were moving closer now, their horses' hooves sucking in the mud. Levi could see the tension building, could feel the moment when words would give way to gunfire. Judge or no judge, Bishop said, you're outnumbered. And Mr. Lane's got friends in high places. Higher than you. Maybe so. Cross's hand rested on his pistol. But I've got something he doesn't. What's that? The law. A gunshot split the night. Not from the confrontation on the porch, but from somewhere beyond the house. One of the riders' horses reared, whinnying in terror, and the man cursed as he fought to control his mount. What in hell? Bishop spun toward the sound more. Gunshots, closer now. And then, through the rain, came the sound of galloping hooves, not approaching, but circling, like Indians on the warpath. Elijah Cross. A voice boomed across the prairie. This is Sheriff Tom Morrison. You all right in there? Relief flooded through Levi's chest. Tom Morrison was an honest lawman, one of the few in the territory who couldn't be bought. But how had he known to come? We're fine, Tom. Cross called back. But we've got some unwelcome visitors. I can see that. Bishop, you and your boys get your hands where I can see them. The tide had turned. Bishop's men were professional killers, but they weren't stupid. Facing a territorial judge, a sheriff, and armed citizens on their own property was a losing proposition. This ain't over, Jensen, Bishop snarled. Mr. Lane don't forget, and he don't forgive. Neither do I, Levi replied quietly as Bishop and his men mounted up and rode into the storm. Levi felt a hand on his shoulder. Judge Cross stood beside him, water streaming from his coat. How did Morrison know to come? Levi asked. That little girl of yours. Smart as a whip. She didn't just ride to get Miss Armstrong. She sent word to the sheriff, too. Told him there was trouble brewing out here. In the bedroom, Peyton was cleaning the baby while Layla rested against the pillows. The newborn's cries had settled into soft, mewling sounds. And despite everything, she looked perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and her mother's storm-gray eyes. She's beautiful, Stella whispered, peering at the baby with wonder. She is, Layla agreed weakly. But she's not safe. Not as long as Owen Lane draws breath. What do you mean? Levi asked that Layla's voice was barely audible. The contract Bishop mentioned, it's real. Owen made me sign it when I was desperate, after my parents died. I didn't understand what it meant then. She looked at her daughter with fierce protectiveness. But he owns me legally. And that means he owns her too. Judge Cross leaned forward. Unless what? Unless someone else had a prior claim. Someone who could prove they had a legal right to protect you both. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to break. But inside the Jensen home, Levi realized that the real battle was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. A prior claim? Levi looked between Judge Cross and the exhausted woman cradling her newborn daughter. What kind of prior claim? Marriage, Cross said simply. If you were to marry Layla, legally and properly witnessed, it would supersede any contract Owen Lane might produce. A husband's rights to protect his wife and child are recognized even in territorial law. The room fell silent except for the baby's soft breathing and the dying storm outside. Stella's eyes went wide, darting between her father and the woman, who'd found sanctuary in her mother's bed. Marriage. Layla's voice was barely a whisper. But you don't even know me. And I'm ruined. Damaged goods, as Owen always said. Owen Lane's a liar, Levi said firmly. And any man who'd call a woman damaged goods ain't fit to breathe the same air as decent folk. Peyton Armstrong looked up from packing her medical supplies. It would work, legally speaking. But Levi, you need to understand what you'd be taking on. Owen Lane won't accept this quietly. He'll come at you with everything he has. Through the window, the first pale light of dawn was beginning to creep across the prairie. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh, but Levi could see riders on the distant hills, Lane's men, keeping watch, waiting for their next opportunity. Papa. Stella's small voice cut through the adult conversation. Would that make Miss Layla my new mama? The question hung in the air like morning mist. Levi looked at his daughter, seeing Nora's gentle wisdom in her young face, then at Layla, who was studying him with those storm-gray eyes. Only if she wanted to be, he said softly. Layla shifted, the baby in her arms, and for a moment, the three of them looked like what they could become, a family forged not by passion or romance, but by necessity and the simple human need to protect the innocent. I've got nothing to offer you, Layla said. No dowry, no family name worth claiming. Just a baby whose father wants to destroy us both. You're wrong about that. Levi pulled up a chair beside the bed. You've got courage. You've got the strength to walk away from a bad situation, to risk everything for your child's future. That's worth more than all of Owen Lane's money. Judge Cross cleared his throat. I hate to press, but time's not on our side. Lane will be gathering his forces, maybe bringing in territorial officials he's bought. If we're going to do this, it needs to be now, while I can still perform the ceremony legally. The ceremony. Stella perked up. Like a real wedding. Simple, but binding. Cross nodded. All it takes is consent from both parties and proper witnesses. Layla looked down at her daughter, then back at Levi. Why? Why would you do this for strangers? Because my Nora would have done the same thing. Because some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked against you. He paused. And because that little girl deserves a chance to grow up free. Outside, Sheriff Morrison's voice called out. Levi? Judge, you folks need to see this. They gathered at the front window, and Levi's blood chilled. At least a dozen riders were approaching from the east. Owen Lane himself at their head, his expensive clothes and silver-studded saddle marking him even at a distance. Behind him rode men who looked more like an army than a posse. He's bringing enough firepower to level the house, Morrison said grimly. We've got maybe 20 minutes before they're in rifle range. Then we do this now, Levi said. He turned to Layla, offering his hand. Will you marry me, Layla Steele? Not for love, not for romance, but for protection and the chance to build something good together. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. Yes, God help us both, yes. Judge Cross opened his Bible with practiced efficiency. Peyton, Sheriff Morrison, you'll stand as witnesses. Stella, you stay close to your papa. The ceremony was swift but heartfelt. As Cross spoke the ancient words, Levi found himself meaning them more than he'd expected. When it came time for rings, Stella surprised them all by producing Nora's simple gold band from her pocket. Mama would want Miss Layla to have it, she said solemnly. By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, Cross concluded, I pronounce you husband and wife. Levi leaned down to kiss Layla's forehead gently, sealing their unlikely union. In her arms, the baby gurgled softly, as if approving of the arrangement. What will you name her? Stella asked. Hope, Layla said, without hesitation. Her name is Hope. Owen Lane's voice boomed across the prairie, amplified by a speaking trumpet. Jensen, send out my property, and we'll discuss terms. Levi stepped onto the porch, his new wife and child safe behind him, his daughter at his side. The morning sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, and somewhere in the distance, he could hear the sound of more riders approaching. But these were coming from the west, from the direction of town. Lane, he called back. You're trespassing on private property. Leave now, and we'll call it even. I want my woman and my child. They're not yours. Levi's voice carried across the prairie like thunder. This woman is my wife, legally married before witnesses. That child is under my protection now. The approaching riders from town were closer now, and Levi could see Tom Morrison's deputies among them, but also ordinary citizens of Shadow Creek, men and women who'd grown tired of Owen Lane's stranglehold. On their community. Lane's response was a gunshot that splintered the porch rail, inches from where Levi stood. But before he could fire again, Sheriff Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. Owen Lane, you're under arrest for attempted murder and violation of territorial law. What followed was brief but decisive. Outnumbered and facing the combined force of law and community, Lane's hired guns scattered like leaves before a wind. Lane himself, purple with rage, found himself in shackles as Morrison read the charges. This isn't over, Jensen, he snarled as they led him away. I've got friends in high places. Maybe, Levi replied calmly. But I've got something better. I've got family. As the dust settled and the last of Lane's men disappeared over the horizon, Levi returned to the house where his new family waited. Layla was sitting up in bed, nursing baby Hope, while Stella arranged flowers from Nora's garden in a mason jar. What happens now? Layla asked. Now we learn to be a family, Levi said. We plant new roses in the spring, teach Hope to ride, watch her grow up free and safe. Stella looked up from her flowers. Will you tell her stories about our mama Nora? Every day, Layla promised. And maybe someday, she'll have stories of her own to tell. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, warming the earth and promising new growth. In the garden, Nora's roses, though dormant for winter, held the promise of spring blooms to come. Well now, folks, that's the tale of how love can bloom even in the harshest soil, when good people stand together against the darkness. If this story warmed your heart like a prairie sunrise, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales from the frontier. Comment below and let us know where you're watching from today.